Hi, good morning and good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar series, Let's Talk Emissions. I'm Amanda Peter, and I will be your host for today. As we're looking at the bigger picture of beyond compliance, the future of maritime decarbonization. While compliance with regulations like the EU ETS or Fuel EU is of major focus, what comes next? How do ship owners balance sustainability with commercial viability? Are alternative fuels truly a near-term solution? To unpack these questions, we have two industry experts with us today. Alexander Senteris, Head of Sustainability and Carbon Markets at OceanOpt, and our guest speaker, Jason Stefanatos, Global Decarbonization Director at DNV. How are you today, gentlemen?
Fine. Good morning.
Hi, Amanda. Thank you.
Nice
Good.
to have you today. At the end of our discussion, we are hosting a live Q&A session, so feel free to submit your questions throughout the duration of this webinar. Now, without further delay, I'll hand it over to our speakers. Jason, we've seen an increase in regulatory pressure, especially from the IMO. But how prepared is the maritime industry in reality?
Yeah, well, that's a quite good question. We have been getting new regulations quite a few years now, and the targets have been set also quite a few years and are quite ambitious. And when it comes to the preparedness level, we talk about technology, we talk about availability of new solutions of fuels, and on that matter, I think we're getting quite well on the technology side. There is a lot of development. There are many things happening, both in terms of energy efficiency, fuels, and technology. And there is a lot of progress. We had a big change in the regulation 2 weeks ago with the new regulation coming from the IMO that changed a lot the perspective, but and put a lot of pressure, more pressure. There are many challenges on how to achieve these targets, but I have to say that from the vessels, from the owners and manager side, we are doing quite well. There has been quite a large uptake of alternative fuels. When it comes to the order book, we see a big amount of the newly built vessels to be able to burn alternative fuels. But this is one side of the coin. I think in order to assess the completeness of the industry preparation levels, we need to take the entire supply chain, and there we need to make sure that we bring the other stakeholders on. So we have fuel producers and fuel suppliers that they also need to ramp up the development and do more things in order to ensure that the fuels that the vessel need to be burned will be available.
What I would just want to add on what Jason said is that, for this to really be sustainable and to see companies investing more and more, which, as rightly said, we've seen a lot of vessels in the order book building flexibility on alternative fuels, we need a stable regulatory framework, and we need this regulatory framework to be as broad as possible, so to avoid imbalances in trading areas, in companies, or owner-wise.
Yeah, definitely. This is something already required, and I think last week, 2 weeks before, with IMO changing a lot, not changing, but adding a lot of pressure. This is exactly what many stakeholders in the industry find as an issue, that it's not something that we know and we can rely on. But so far, I think it's too early to assess what the outcome of IMO's new regulation will be, what the implications. But I think so far the main compliance driver, investment driver was coming from other stakeholders. So regulations were there, but we have quite a few more stakeholders that have been pushing. We have cargo owners and charterers that they have a lot of focus on this. We have financial institutions, insurers. All these now start to focus on emissions, not now, even the past years. And I think this is the main driver behind the big investments. If you take most of the vessels that are able to burn alternative fuels, you will see that there is a connection with some demand or a requirement from a charterer or a cargo owner at some point.
Overall, you feel that the market forces are pushing for these projects, or is it part of a compliance driving investment?
What we see is that it's the initial drive, the initial thing that sets the wheels in motion is the regulatory requirements, but the dominant drivers are the commercial drivers. That was up until now, before we saw the new regulations from IMO.
On the projects and on the business side, what are the most prominent, let's say, technologies of fuels that you see getting some pace? We have heard about a lot of alternatives, some of them a bit more mature than others, but what is your view on that?
I think there are developments in all fronts. I would not distinguish one over the other. And the reason is that the industry is so versatile and so different that we don't expect to see the same solutions being applied universally to the entire global fleet. Depending on the ship type, ship size, even the trade route, we expect to see different solutions. And this is what happens also as well. If we take fuels, for example, we see that more than half of the existing order book is able to burn alternative fuels, LNG, methanol, and ammonia, in essence. But if you start to deep dive into the ship segments, you see that this is not uniform. You have container ships, ro-ros, and cruise vessels that have very high uptake of fuels, more than 80%, 80%. And then you have tankers and bulk carriers that are on the lower side. You have much lower uptake. And I think this shows that the technological development is there, but the uptake is something different. And it has to do with the operation of the vessel, the commercial implications, and the bottom line, the business case. You need to have a positive business case to make sure that the investments go forward.
That's very, very interesting, because we don't have anymore this one solution that fits the entire fleet. The whole environment is shifting, and this creates some additional considerations, creates some additional maybe risks, maybe in the decision stage, creates some additional items that needs to be considered.
Definitely, and I think this is in line with what you said earlier about a stable regulatory framework, that there are already too many parameters to take into consideration. So if you have a fluctuating requirement, it's adding a level of complexity that makes it impossible to take a proper decision.
And that's critical to stabilize this environment.
Exactly.
Do you feel that the developments with IMO is a step towards that goal?
Yeah, I don't know if it is. I mean, there are voices in the industry that claim it's good, others that claim it's bad, others that claim it's neutral. Whatever it is, at least it is something. So, whatever the regulatory scheme brings, at least we need to have it. We need to have the requirements, we need to have the targets, and we also need to have the reference on how to do it, meaning the life cycle assessment, the LCA parts that IMO is working on. So we know how to assess, because currently there are also gaps on how to assess this, the various technologies and the various fuels.
Yes, and just our point, and what I want to add on that is that we need to keep the regulation as neutral to technologies as possible, of course, to leave space for everyone to develop. But what we have noticed is that also there is a need for convergence. It cannot be that the way that the fuels are assessed or the way that the whole system is handled is different from region to region, or you have different schemes that don't operate in the same way. We need to somehow make all these frameworks into one common, let's say, set of requirements, rather than having several inflexible, admin-heavy regulatory requirements that are trying to push shipping to one specific goal, but cannot work altogether. What I wanted to ask you is, now with all this, with all these developments, with the order book, with the investment going forward, what do you feel is the biggest bottleneck preventing the mass adoption or the broader adoption of those technologies?
I mean, before I go there, just to take a step back and to see again that when it comes to fuels, for example, we have, I would say, 4 main technologies, 4+1. We have LNG, methanol, ammonia, hydrogen, and biofuel. So we see a quite different approach in each one of them, and because we have different challenges. So if coming back to your question, what is the biggest bottleneck? I would say different fuels and technologies have different bottlenecks, but one that is unique for all has to do with the availability. This is I think, the major showstopper for many cases. We have the supply-demand conundrum, the chicken and the egg problem, that no one will invest in demand if there is no supply, and investment in supply will be much harder if there is no demand. But here, I think one view around this is that if you see the shipping industry, the part of the shipping industry in the global energy mix is quite low. It's approximately, let's say, 3 to 4%. That means this is the energy that shipping is using compared to the entire energy our planet is using. And that means that it's not negligible, but it is not big. So the fuel suppliers and the fuel producers mainly, they will focus in bigger consuming industries, not first, but mainly. And that means that in this conundrum between there is more focus put on the demand side, because if we don't have the demand, the supply will be challenging to come. If we have the demand, the chances of having the supply is much, much bigger. And this is something that we see already happening in the few years that we see LNG and methanol fueled vessels. We see the more vessels we have on the water that are able to burn those fuels, the more suppliers, the more producers think about those fuels, and the more infrastructure is being built. There is no way to solve this issue with a snap of the finger. It will be a very long transition. The fuel transition will take time, but we need to have all the stakeholders on board. And definitely we need to make sure, as from the maritime, from the ship owning side, that we do whatever we can in order to ensure that our part in this has been fulfilled. And there are many ways to overcome this bottleneck. I mean, the problem with a lot of fuel producers going for green methanol, for example, is that they cannot have offtake agreement to ensure that they will manage to sell their product. And there are organizations that are working a lot on ensuring that they merge the cargo owners that want green transport, and they connect them with the ship owners and the fuel suppliers that are able to do it. So this is one way to overcome the bottleneck. Green corridors is another one, but in any case, cooperation and focus on how to break this conundrum is key.
What I would like to highlight from what you said is like that we need in shipping to understand the environment and also try to address the challenge in consideration of how the world is really advancing in fuel technologies. And collaboration is key. Collaboration was always key. And the infrastructure is the main thing, and this challenge of infrastructure is the main bottleneck for all these technologies. Other than the fuel technologies, let's say, which have been covered now, what are the technology investments that you see more impactful, and also what are the key technologies that you see ship owners preferring?
I think there is a quite large list of other technologies. We recently published a report trying to cover all these energy efficiency and other technologies. We had more than 40 measures that a ship owner can implement, spanning from operational measures, technical measures, and other more exotic solutions like carbon capture or fuel cells. And I think we live in a period that is an abundance of development and engineering. If you have an engineering background, I think many people are excited to be in this period of the industry. I honestly think that in 2 decades, we will look back this decade like the decade that had the big change in how we do engineering and development in the industry. So we see a lot of technologies. There are some, starting from the operational measures, there are many many technologies that can act as low-hanging fruit. The challenge here is that, and already implemented a lot, hull cleaning and stuff like that. We also have a lot of potential coming from operational decisions that are not in the decision-making of the owners. So this is something that requires a decision at a higher level, including the charterer and the ports. But then when we go to technologies, mainly I would say hydrodynamic technologies are the ones that have been drawing a lot of interest, and we see many installations for quite a few years. And it makes sense because they are easy to retrofit typically, not quite high capex, and the return on investment is quite good. Another big part of technology that is coming quite a lot, and we keep hearing about new projects and new installations, is wind-assisted propulsion systems. So wind power has been the main fuel of ships for millennia, and then it got away. It was only for leisure and for small boats. Now it has a comeback. I always start with a disclaimer that it's not for the global fleet. It's not for every vessel. You need to fulfill some criteria to make it positive. But for those vessels that have been sailing in, that have specific routes, and these routes are have favorable winds, there is quite a big potential. We have seen vessels that have installed rigid sails that I think it was a Cape-size bulker that was able to sail 5.5 knots without using the main engine, which is quite impressive. And also, when it comes to wind, it provides a quite big benefit, especially for FuelEU, but something similar for IMO, because it gives this reward factor. So in any case, if you install this, already there is quite a lot of benefit. The challenge now with all this is that, as I said, we have an abundance of new development and new technologies coming, and that is good because it means we have more and more solutions to utilize, but it also creates a new challenge, a new need of actually verifying this technology, because we have seen quite a few technologies that in theory are quite spectacular and beneficial, but in practice, reality is far away from theory. And here we need to have good quality of data, because we need to learn as an industry. It is something new, and we need to make sure that we verify the savings on real operations. We need to have good quality data. We need to have proper methodologies, science-based methodologies that are able to exclude other phenomena and only take into consideration the impact that the technology has. And we also need to make sure that we test these technologies in real conditions. It is very often that we take the savings in one operating condition that the vessel spends 3 days per year max, and in the real operations, savings are quite low. All in all, we need more information, we need more data and more trust in the data.
And the operational profile plays a huge role. We need to find technologies that have a broader operational profile that can assist and reduce the emissions throughout the profile of the vessel, not just one specific operational point, just to build a case. And what we have seen is that, as you said, also there are some technologies that have been broadly used all these past years, some mainly hydrodynamic, I would say, adjustments. But after these first steps are made, it becomes, I feel, a lot more difficult to really pick a technology. You cannot easily pick a technology that can be applied to any vessel, to any operational profile. The way that you can then really select a technology becomes much more technical, and you need to have much more operational considerations, including the vessel trade, including the profile. Also, what we've seen is that, especially I think on the container business in the past, that there are technologies that can readjust the vessel operational profile when it was designed on a completely different market, completely different operating position conditions, and now it needs a recalibration on this end. But yes, the first steps are easy, but what we like to think is that, you know, it is not one, you cannot solve it overnight. So the first step may be easy. The second step will become more difficult, and every step forward will need further considerations, going up to a point where we can discuss wind propulsion operation, or as you mentioned, carbon capture, which has been a key topic the past few years, and consideration and discussion both in IMO and in European Union, still waiting to see how it will develop, which has been a technology that was used on stationary installations in the past, but the profile of a vessel is completely different to that. So it's even technology and the maturity of the technologies that can lead us to the end goal. Do you feel that these technologies are there, or it's a work in progress?
Yeah, I think I would say the technologies are there, but the adoption is work in progress. So it's not easy to change the industry from one day. We have repeated that many times, but I would say, especially when you have other stakeholders being involved, you need to have some time and the incentives to do it, right? I mean, we see, if you take an example about the ISOs of the fuels, although we have recently updated ISOs, if you see in reality the usage of the bunkers in practice is that they use quite older ISOs. So that demonstrates that if something is working and there is no clear incentive, then we cannot do big changes quickly.
What has become a market standard, I feel, the past years as well, is the digitalization and the data aspect. And the data management part, which has been a key element for the first year of adapting all this regulation after MRV, but now with EU ETS, Fuel EU in place, and all the discussion about the GFI going forward. How you feel about digitalization and in general emission data management as part of the transition? Is it a necessary step, or is it something that leads us forward?
Sorry,
I
Jason,
think
before just to give you a few minutes to think about your question, I would just like to jump in here for a kind reminder to all our viewers that you can submit your questions using the Q&A feature on Teams, and we'll answer them after our discussion. Thank you so much, and back to Jason.
Thank you, Amanda. So back to the question, definitely digitalization is something that goes along with decarbonization. Data are important for various aspects of improving the industry, safety, sailing, but also decarbonization. We see the 2Ds that go together. The way to use data the ways to use data are unlimited. You have so many things to do, but I would like to focus on a few. First of all, just to take a step back and see a big transition that happened in the industry in 2017, 2018, when MRV came. The industry, the data collection system, the average data collection system of the industry was quite old. I remember there were noon reporting done in emails or words, some advanced companies in an Excel file, and the advanced companies, they were already using software. But due to the requirement of MRV and DCS 1 year later, we saw a big transition of companies going to more advanced noon reporting solutions. Over the years, we saw an increase of automation and data acquisition systems, more and more data coming from the vessels. Now I'm talking about the average. Of course, you have the front runners and the laggards, but on the average, we saw a not so fast adoption of those solutions. And then we have the ETS kicking in last year when the emissions were connected to some cost. And this is when we saw, and 1 year later, the Fuel EU, and in a few years, we will see GFI. And this is when we saw, and we expect to see a bigger second transition towards more automation. We see many companies now, they need to have statements throughout the year. They need to have data being flown to other stakeholders. And this is something that requires automation and proper data quality and data acquisition systems. So I think we already have quite a few data. There are many performance analytics and performance management and optimization capabilities. There are various solutions on how to do it, and more energy managers and energy and performance engineers use data to improve to daily operation. So this is something that definitely will help, and helps in practice not only to achieve the compliance targets, but also reduce costs, reduce consumption, and improve the financial performance. Another reason why data will play a role is that the industry is moving towards more and more transparency. This is something that is liked by all stakeholders, even ship owners and ship managers, that they want more transparency, and especially the ones that are the forerunners. They feel that if transparency is not there, there is not an even playing field, and that means that they cannot really capitalize on the investments they did for being greener. And last, I would like to focus on another aspect on how data are important, which I already talked about the uncertainty we have on new technologies and how the claims and the savings need to be verified. And a prerequisite to do it are data. As I already mentioned, top quality data are needed to make sure that we assess the new technology. And if decision making is hard, having more data will make us wiser, so decision maker becomes a bit more solid, more trusted based on data and not just gut feeling or theoretical studies.
Yeah, the digital performance emission data are the foundation, I would say. I mean, we need them for data sharing for commercial purposes. A lot more stakeholders, banks, insurers, charters, of course, but a lot of stakeholders are now requesting the data. And I feel that we are in a relatively early stage, as you know, the assessment and the kind of conclusion drawn by those data are relatively, basic at this point. But I think we are in a learning stage, and this requirement will only create some sort of clarity, some knowledge base on the data, and going forward, it would be the foundation for all technologies. And really, any business case should be supported by a clear and very transparent benefit in the emission data, or in general in the energy performance and emission data, I would say. So what was interesting that you mentioned was that the transparency in the data sharing is a competitive advantage, or like a prerequisite going forward. What I would like to shift our focus now is, do you see a competitive advantage in sustainability technologies in general? So do you see that kind of a front runner, a pioneer in this stage, is getting some competitive advantage out of their investment, or it is something that we will see in the next years?
Yeah, well, that is quite a good question. I would start by saying that typically in shipping and also in some regions, geographical regions, we see every new regulation as threat. And this is what also has been done with decarbonization. Like, it's a new threat, how to tackle it. But we see more and more over the past years that companies start to see an opportunity in it. In various ways, from new cargoes, new technologies being in the forefront, so having competitive advantage. So I would say the short answer to your question would be yes. There may be the trade specific ship type and size and trade may allow for decarbonization to being the forerunner of decarbonization, working as a competitive advantage. We have seen many cases that this works already. We expect that with the new regulations coming into force and the ever-increasing focus of charterers on ESG and emissions, that this will increase. But one example that makes it quite evident is if you take the vessels that have LNG, you will not go from HFO and MGO to LNG in a snap. You need to develop competence, you need to develop systems, you need to train crew, you need to do a lot of things that take time, and to do it safely and properly takes a lot of investment and effort. So a company that has been operating LNG fueled container ships or tankers the past 4, 3-4 years, they have already an advantage. They have this knowledge, they have these systems. And we see that the past 1-2 years, they have been using that as a competitive advantage. So we see owners and owners that had traditionally one ship type, they try to expand and go to other ship types, and their value proposition is the fact that they know LNG as a fuel. So that shows that whoever is a forerunner, there are conditions that can use it as competitive advantage. I'm not saying, it's not black and white. With all this uncertainty and changes in the rules and the regulations, it's not easy to bet in one solution and make sure that this is it. But assuming that a few conditions are met, then yes, definitely this can act as competitive advantage. Also, this is very specific on the trade. You have commodities that the commodity traders and the charterers, the cargo owners, could not care less about emissions. So in that case, I would see a big challenge of using the fact that you're a front runner as towards a competitive advantage. But then you have other sectors that are very much focused on ESG. And in this case, having a greener vessel, whatever that means, with all the technologies and fuels, definitely can act on the benefit of the owner and the attractiveness of the vessel.
What is very, very important, and you highlighted as well, is that it is important to understand that even going into a technology that is mature in terms of TRL doesn't mean that the adoption of it is easy. You cannot just change overnight on a typical fuel-based procedure crew that has never managed LNG. You cannot just overnight shift it to methanol or LNG. So what is important for everyone to consider is that it is a transition. Even to a mature solution, it is a transition. And transition need time, transition need investment, transition need training. They need to invest in people. They need to align the procedures, work on a completely different way than it used to be.
And one comment on that, sorry to interrupt, but I think this is spot on, and this is, if you take how the rules, the rules of alternative fuels and other fuels are taken, this is exactly it. IGF and the class rules and the various MARPOL articles do not go from HFO to hydrogen. It will be a stepwise approach, and I think this reflects exactly what you said, that in practice, we will do it as well. So this is something that we have been doing. LNG rules are there for quite a few years. Methanol and ammonia rules are for less years, but they base on the past experience. And this will be a stepwise transition.
And this experience needs to be built step by step towards that goal. As you said, it's not that we can go from zero to hero in a night. So you cannot just wait for hydrogen or ammonia or something exotic or whatever become mature, and then you go full on that. There is a process, an experience growing process that needs to be considered, and also an important point is what we feel is the optionality that becomes more important. So when you have all these uncertainties, regulation, you cannot know, and as we mentioned initially in our discussion, we don't expect one solution that will fit everyone, every asset class, every vessel, every size. So there is a need to create this optionality. There is a need to diversify. There is a need to create some safety net, which we feel is very, very important. And I think this was one of the main reasons that we see a lot of vessels built with dual fuel capabilities. Okay, the selection of the dual fuel is topic of discussion, is a debate. Every owner will focus on their preference, or they may diversify. We have seen this as well. So a lot of owners that they go into new technologies, dual fuel technologies, but they also diversify on this front. So they won't pick just one. They would try to somehow create a more broad portfolio of assets, and that has been important. And I think this is a key element that needs to be considered, and we see being considered in new building, that actually helps in avoiding the asset becoming obsolete on a very, very shorter period than expected.
Exactly. I think, as you say, flexibility is key. With all this uncertainty, you cannot hedge on one solution. It's critical, and this, of course, is not only limited in the borders of one vessel. It can also be expanded in the fleet level. So this is where we see larger fleets. They try to diversify, investing in various solutions, both in terms of making sure that the average will be, positive, but also because of what we discussed earlier of developing competence and understanding for various solutions, so as to be more prepared, as much prepared as possible for the future.
I would like to make one last question, topic of discussion before we go to the live Q&A, and that would be, if you would give some sort of guidance or advice, what would be the main topic that a ship owner shall prioritize in the next 5 to 10 years, and if there is a mindset shift in the industry that is needed to accelerate this decarbonization effort?
Yeah. Well, on the first part of the question about what should ship owners prioritize in the next 5 years, I would say that if you asked me 3 weeks ago, I would give an answer. But after IMO
the answer
new
is
decision,
completely different.
yeah, that would most probably whatever I say now today will be different in 4 weeks.
But we ask you today, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The answer is for today.
But I would say definitely focusing on fuels. There will be a lot of focus on fuels. And I used to say, and I keep saying, that before ordering a new vessel, you need to make a study on the adoption of fuels. Even if it is a ship type and size that it makes no sense to have an alternative fuel, I always suggest to go through this process of doing the study. You know the result already, but at least then it will not be a gut feeling based decision. It will be a fact based decision that will help you first understand how the rules and the assumptions are. And when the time comes, you will be much wiser to change these assumptions, and maybe the outcome is different. And now with the new rules from IMO, we see this becoming even more topical. And at the same time, we see energy efficiency being important. So for the next 5 years, I would definitely suggest to prioritize the change of mindset that you need to study and to investigate what can be done, and definitely put more focus on the fuels. Now, when it comes to the mindset shift, we have talked a lot about collaboration and making sure that all the stakeholders are on the same page and table. I would say that the mindset shift that we need and that we somewhat see the past years is to collaborate more, to see the opportunities and test out the new technologies, which is connected to not being biased against technologies. The targets are quite strict. We have limited time, not limited, but finite number of solutions. So we need to make sure that we don't shut doors early based on biases. We need to make sure that we properly and deeply investigate all technologies and make sure that we apply the technologies to the ship segments that make sense. As we discussed in the very beginning of the discussion, we don't expect all solutions to fit all vessels, but we expect many solutions to fit many vessels. So we need to make sure that we do whatever we can on that side.
What is important and what you also mentioned is that even if we consider an asset that is being built now, we need to assess the full lifespan of this asset, which is fairly difficult at this point if you consider how all these moving parts are basically creating the environment that we're discussing now. But what I find very, very important that you mentioned, that even if the business case is not there for an asset, even in that case, going through the assessment of the technologies is critical, because it's not only deciding on the day one, it's also understanding what are the parameters affecting and how these new parameters that will be revised, maybe at some point, new developments and everything, will basically affect the business case for each asset class, or even for this particular vessel that was built. And lastly, I feel that at this point, still all these regulations and all the industry and the decarbonization efforts are more seen like a regulatory burden, but slowly shifting to understand that this is a new business environment that will create opportunities that have a commercial impact, and that someone that is proactively taking care of it will have an edge over time. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but over time will definitely have an edge.
Yes, exactly that. And just to wrap it up, I would say, especially on your last topic, I think you're spot on. We see now ETS and Fuel EU being more an administrative cost, that you just pass to the next one. But this will ramp up, and especially when GFI kicks in, this will ramp up quite more. And I think we see a big variation of how prepared the companies are. You have companies that already know how they plan to do it and what plans they will follow, and you have other companies that they barely understand the regulation. So I think an important aspect is to make sure that you keep developing your competence and your knowledge around these issues, and you are prepared not when the deadline comes, but way before that.
Amanda, sorry that we ran a bit late, but now we can go into the live Q&A. Amanda, your mic.
I apologize. Thank you so much to Alex and Jason. That was very insightful. So now we will move over to our Q&A session. Let's now look at the submitted questions from our audience. So earlier in this discussion, the topic of technology with regards to emissions management and compliance were addressed. So Jason, in your opinion, how can we test different technologies that will be effective across, the real world operating conditions of the vessels?
That is not easy to respond to because we have totally different types of technologies. So there are technologies that you could capture with a very good physics-based phenomenological simulation model, and there are others that you need measurements, and you need extensive measurements. In DNV, we have been trying to tackle that, so we have published 3 recommended practices over the past years that are openly provided to the industry to make sure how to do it, and they are focused on specific technologies. So there is one generic how to assess the performance of the vessel, and now we have started diving into various technologies. We started with air lubrication systems and wind propulsion systems, wind-assisted propulsion systems. Again, it's not one way to do it, but definitely real-time measurements are needed. And of course, as this is costly, it's always good to aggregate this effort, and this is why collaboration and cooperation is key.
What I can add a bit is that we always need to assess the operational profile. We need to assess the asset. We need to assess how it operates, which conditions. It is, I would say, also an important thing is go back to basics. Go back to basics is technical assessment of technology. Okay, with Jason, we share the same background actually, so we focus on this aspect. But understanding the technology is key. So how does it really work? You know, what are the physics behind it? Is it applicable to the vessel? Because every vessel has a different technical consideration, technical aspects, other constraints that needs to be considered operationally. So all these things need to be assessed during any evaluation of alternative technology.
All right, thank you very much. And the next question is posed to the both of you, so you can take turns to answer. In the recently concluded MEPC 83 meeting, the legal text for an IMO net zero framework was approved with a view to approve this by October of this year. If adopted, what impact, if any, does this framework have on the choices of ship owners in terms of the alternative fuels that they choose or the technologies that they choose to implement? What would the impact be on the choices that the ship owners have? And will this framework speed up development of specific types of alternative fuels or technologies in the industry?
Jason, do you want to comment first, or I can?
Yes, I can have a short comment. I mean, it's too early to really understand the full implications of the new regulations, and we still await the final approval in October. But we can say that this is quite more ambitious scheme than FuelEU. So whatever we have planned for FuelEU, now it will be accelerated. Definitely fuel will be much more critical. Which fuel we need to do more investigations around it, but definitely there is a clear push towards more, towards the more advanced fuels, the net zero and the very low carbon fuels.
From mine and our end, of course, I mean, it's still early. We wait a lot of clarification. We need really to go through how each fuel is assessed, how the calculation will be done. Hopefully or not, depending on your view, we'll see in October this regulation going forward. But what is certain at this point is that it will push toward an alternative, whatever that be. If structured properly, it shouldn't push towards one alternative, but create a neutral environment for all technologies and all fuels to develop. But what we see as a very, very important thing, and we advocate for that as well in the past, that this creates a global framework that is important for everyone to develop. So if you want to develop global logistics, global supply chains, global infrastructure, you cannot. It cannot be happen. It cannot happen with a regional regulation like EU. So, if the goal of decarbonizing is better addressed with a global regulation, it is, as Jason said, quite ambitious. Creates a hefty kind of incentive for ship owners to work on that. Is it enough at this early stage? Remains to be seen. So at this point, the cost of abatement, the cost of an alternative technology is also volatile as well. So we're in an early stage. We don't know how the technologies will develop. We cannot know in 2, 3, 5 years, even at the date that the regulation will adapt, what will be the level of its technology and what would be the abatement cost and the constraints of its technology. But what is definitely true is that this will push toward the decarbonization, accelerate the process, and hopefully create an environment that it is business essence to really go to an alternative and create a solid business case for owners to transition.
Great. So the next question is, could the coexistence of IMO and regional schemes like Fuel EU lead to compliance fatigue or duplication of efforts?
Yeah, this is a topic I think that we have been discussing since MRV and DCS came with 1 year difference. Definitely it adds more on the administrative side. It is not clear if one will replace the other, but definitely there are signs from the EU that if something works in IMO, they will be positive to reconsider. But I think it's too early to say something more solid than that.
Yeah, at both regulation, the EU ETS and Fuel EU, there is a paragraph, a provision that says that, I think, Jason, correct me if I'm wrong, that says that if international regulation come on an adequate level that is equal or better than EU regulation, that EU may reconsider or withdraw the regulation. Let's see. I would agree with Jason that, okay, these are the provisions, this is a discussion, and a lot of voices are already raising that, okay, now we go into a scheme basically, and we are we need to tackle the same aspect multiple times, and it is in a way double regulation over the same aspect, which in this case is greenhouse gas fuel intensity, GFI or Fuel EU, you name it. But this is a key consideration. It is too early to really have a comment on that, but certainly there are discussions over it.
Okay, in light of GFI, your discussions on the shift towards automation and data-driven decarbonization sparked by many regulations like EU MRV and IMO DCS really underscores the industry's progress. It's fascinating to see how these changes are pushing better data practices. How do you envision regulations like Fuel EU and GFI shaping the industry's approach to standardizing automated data systems, and what hurdles do you think may arise in maintaining data quality during this shift?
Well, I see we have 1 minute left and we can spend 30 minutes to discuss on this, but I will try to be brief with a short comment, so I will allow some time for Alex to comment on that as well. As I said, we saw a big transition coming from MRV, and we see more and more expected from Fuel EU and GFI, especially with Fuel EU and ETS and GFI, we see that now it's connected to other stakeholders as well. So there are more needs to have the data verified, good quality data throughout the year. And this, of course, needs a lot of layers of things to be correct. You need a proper data acquisition, you need proper system, you need transition to land, and you need also a verification engine that can work. All these 4 elements need to work seamlessly throughout the year. it's not only that the requirements become more strict, it's also that the processes behind all this become more complex. So we have more stakeholders needing data. The owner is not only in the past, it used to be that the vessel reports to land. The land may analyze or manage and analyze the data and then send to the verifier. Now, this is a very simple flow chart with 3 boxes. Now, the flow chart of today may have 15 more boxes. So this is why it is critical to have a proper system, and we expect more and more vessels to adopt such systems.
What I would like to comment on that is that for the past years, having such system was good to have. I think we need solely to shift into that this is a foundational requirement going forward. And if a company wants to address all these challenges with decarbonization, data sharing, etc., this is the foundation. You cannot work without a proper system. Data accuracy is key. Data transparency is key, as we have discussed during this webinar. But also what I would add at this point is interoperability. So we need to connect. A lot of people want the data. A lot of people commercially require the data. The data is basically the main element that helps us prove our case, prove that we are working on this path, and this is crucial. Data accuracy has been a challenge, I think, for a lot of people this first year. We've seen connection with the verifier, processes. All these things are almost mandatory, I would say. I mean, it is very, very important to really structure the processes, really create a system that is easily workable. The accuracy and the quality of the data is of utmost importance, and we need to create an ecosystem that this data can be shared and used and basically create value on a wide range of collaborators.
Thank you very much, Alex and Jason. Now for the last question before we end off the Q&A. How regulations and energy transitions will impact the crew and their training to go on board the vessels?
I think it's quite important. I mean, we talk about theory, but someone will operate that. And we see more and more interest around the actual operation, because so far we have been mainly the discussion was around the decision of going for a fuel or not. But now we have vessels that are sailing. So having crew members that are competent and feel safe to operate these vessels is important. And the industry needs to already start ramping up. We have been doing a project and we published a recommended practice on the competence matrix around the safe operation of methanol and ammonia. And from studies we have been part of, we see that there is a huge amount of mariners that will need to go through training in the next few years.
I think Jason basically covered mostly everything, but transitioning to a new fuel or a new type of technology requires the safety procedures of the company to be adjusted for the new fuel. The SMS should reflect the same. Risk assessment should be done, and also identify all the hazards potential in operation, hazard identification as well. A lot of training on the actual system. I mean, the fuel supply is different. The engine or whatever the energy generator will be different. So all of these aspects are new and shall be covered in the training and during the transition, so that actually the crew on board is capable of addressing the new challenges.
All right. Thank you, Alex and Jason, for such an insightful discussion on the critical roles and data automation in maritime decarbonization. Your points about the industry's transition towards advanced data systems driven by regulations like EU MRV and Fuel EU have given us a much clearer vision of the path ahead. So let's come together and push for a standardized quality data to steer our industry towards a sustainable future. So thank you again, Alex and Jason, for your insights, and thank you everyone for joining us. If we didn't get to answer your questions, don't worry, we'll address them when we post the recorded sessions. And our next webinar in the Let's Talk Emission series is coming in July. So follow us on LinkedIn or our website by scanning the QR code on my screen to stay updated. To see you next time. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.